From the Cronkite studios in downtown Phoenix, this is Cronkite News.
Good evening and welcome to this special edition of Cronkite News on Arizona PBS. I'm Karina Espinoza. Thank you for joining us. Tonight, a look back on stories from our Washington, D.C. bureau, from President Trump's long-lasting impact on the judiciary to efforts to create a museum celebrating American Latino history.
Whether he's impeached or not, there's no question President Trump has had an impact on the government, and one impact could be felt for decades if he's removed from office: his federal judicial appointments.
Cronkite News reporter Hannah Ehrlich talked to experts in Washington about what a Trump-appointed judiciary will mean.
As of Friday, the Senate had already approved 157 of President Trump's court picks, more than any of the 5 previous presidents had confirmed by November 1st of their 3rd year in office. And the Senate is voting again today on more nominees, as Trump continues to overhaul the federal bench.
A bench that both sides agree will be decidedly more conservative for decades to come.
Almost all of these people are stars, and a lot are superstars. It's a higher quality than any previous administration, certainly in modern times.
2 of the highest profile appointments were also among the most controversial: Supreme Court Justices Neil Gorsuch and Brett Kavanaugh. Confirmation hearings on Kavanaugh were particularly emotional as he faced charges of sexual assault from his teen years. Thomas Jipping of the Heritage Foundation says Trump nominees have succeeded despite such strong opposition.
I think he's making good progress, appointing good judges, but in spite of, rather than because of, a lot of resistance.
But opponents like Elliot Minkberg of People for the American Way say that resistance is merited, considering the impact courts have on the country.
These Trump judges are on the courts for life, and they're going to continue to have bad effects for a very long time. But electing a Democrat is extremely important, in our view, to avoid further damage and, frankly, to turn things around, both on the Supreme Court and on lower courts.
Whether you like the president or not, Shapiro thinks there's a lot to like about his judicial appointments.
These are not Trumpy judges, whatever that might mean. These are solid, scholarly people with established track records.
In addition to his 2 Supreme Court appointments, Trump has also been able to name about 1/4 of judges on federal circuit courts, the courts from which future Supreme Court justices are often picked. Minkberg and Shapiro agree on one thing: if reelected, Trump will continue to remake the judiciary.
Well, already Trump has appointed about 1/4 of the federal appellate judges, the circuit judges. With another term, presumably he would get up to almost half.
Trump's impact can already be seen in Arizona. 3 judges on the U.S. District Court were named by him, with 2 district court vacancies yet to fill. And 7 judges on the 9th Circuit, which includes Arizona, are Trump appointees. In Washington, Hannah Ehrlich, Cronkite News.
She's been an ambassador and she's been a Valley business leader.
And now Barbara Barrett is on the verge of adding another impressive line to her resume, as Heather Cumberledge reports from D.C.
Barbara Barrett is in line to be the next Secretary of the Air Force after the Senate voted yesterday to confirm her nomination. But Washington wasn't the only thing on her mind.
Arizona is important to the Air Force, and the Air Force is important to Arizona.
The Senate voted 85-7 to confirm Barrett, a Valley businesswoman, a former U.S. ambassador to Finland, and a pilot, among many other roles. She said she is honored and excited by the prospect of taking over at the Air Force.
I'm conscious of what a great privilege it is to be a part of the United States Air Force. I'm also especially attentive to the reality that this wouldn't happen without the leadership of Senator Martha McSally.
McSally appeared to be even more excited after the confirmation vote than Barrett. It was the Republican senator who put Barrett's name forward.
We then had to convince President Trump to nominate her, but that was an easy case to make. But I got on the phone and personally advocated for Barbara to be able to be in this position, and then the Senate overwhelmingly supporting you.
Barrett's nomination hearings were smooth. She talked about the need for a Space Force and faced questions about the use of Trump hotels for Air Force business. But the concerns did not get in the way of her confirmation. Arizona's other senator, Democrat Kyrsten Sinema, said in a statement from her office that Barrett is professionally qualified and will uphold the mission of the Air Force to keep Arizona families safe and secure. Both Barrett and McSally cautioned that nothing is official until it's signed off on by Trump. But that shouldn't be a problem, with the White House saying yesterday that it applauds Barbara Barrett's confirmation this evening to serve our nation's airmen and civilians as the next Secretary of the United States Air Force. The White House said Trump looks forward to working with Barrett, as does McSally. She said the president's approval usually follows the Senate vote in a couple of days.
This is a really great day for Arizona. It's a great day for our airmen and our Air Force and for our country.
In Washington, Heather Cumberledge, Cronkite News.
The problem of missing and murdered Indigenous women is real, but how much is the government doing to prevent violence against Native American women? That was the question at a House hearing today in D.C. Cronkite News reporter Heather Cumberledge was at the hearing and is live in our Washington bureau with her story. Heather?
For about 2 hours today, House members grilled officials from the Bureau of Indian Affairs at the Department of Health and Human Services. They wanted to see just what the government is doing, and they were not always happy with the answers. Phoenix Congressman Ruben Gallego asked why authorities can't keep track of the number of Native women who go missing.
You say tribal affiliation data fields to systems. Why did it take the Department of Justice and VA over 10 years to see the flaw in their data? Second question is, prior to tribal affiliation data field, what was used in place of tribal affiliation data field prior to that to actually collect this? And i.e. were all crimes listed as just Indian or something, some other type of category?
At one point, he even accused a witness of cutting and pasting his testimony from a previous hearing. He told the panel the time for talk is past.
But, we want to see more beyond listening sessions. We want to see actions.
That was echoed by Tucson Representative Raul Grijalva.
A discussion about what needs to be done at a federal level.
While the hearing was sometimes tense, it was not as emotional as a later event, meant to recognize the Native women who have been victims of violence.
Today, we want to remember who this is really about, and a lot of them are not here today, most of them. And in remembering them, the shawls are going to represent the women that aren't here and what they've went through.
The purple shawl represents those who suffer or have died from domestic violence. Blue is for victims of sexual assault, white for stalking victims, and red for the missing and murdered.
Native American women experience a disproportional amount of violence. In fact, 8 in 10 Indigenous women will be raped, stalked, or abused in her lifetime. These statistics are unacceptable.
Holland, one of the first Native American women elected to Congress, called for a renewal of the Violence Against Women Act. VAWA, passed in 1994, provides judicial and law enforcement tools to combat violence against all women. But Holland said it enhances protection for Native American women.
I want the Violence Against Women Act to get to the floor of the Senate. Right now, Mitch McConnell is holding it up. It passed in the House back in April. And in order to protect women and to protect Indigenous women, we need that bill to get to the floor of the Senate so that the senators can vote yes on it.
Holland said that reauthorization of VAWA would be timely. It was 25 years ago this week that the law was first passed. In Washington, Heather Cumberledge, Cronkite News.
It's been almost a year since the Trump administration enacted its Migrant Protection Protocol, also called Remain in Mexico.
The policy makes asylum seekers wait in Mexico while their asylum request is considered. So how's it working out?
And that depends on who you ask, as Hannah Ehrlich reports from our Washington bureau.
Opinions on the policy split along party lines during today's hearing by the House Homeland Security Committee.
Today's subcommittee will hear about how the Trump administration Remain in Mexico policy has distorted our immigration system by effectively closing the door to people seeking safety in this country.
While Democrats said the policy threatens the safety of migrants, Republicans like Congressman Mike Rogers said it helps Border Patrol agents in the short term.
Every day, 50% of Border Patrol agents were taken off the line to process and care for immigrants.
He said Remain in Mexico and other approaches will not get to the root of the problem.
Finally, Congress acted in providing critical emergency funding. While the funding helped, it did nothing to address the root cause of the crisis, and that's loopholes in our asylum laws.
That was echoed by Arizona Representative Debbie Lesko, who said loopholes in U.S. immigration law is what's causing people to seek asylum.
I've said before, and I will repeat again, I think these loopholes actually incentivize people.
She pointed to the fear standard, a criterion used when weighing an asylum request, as just one thing that needs to be toughened.
And so changing some of these loopholes and clearing them, I think will help mitigate the entire problem.
While they sparred over the impact of the policy, neither Republicans nor Democrats presented data that appeared to sway the other side, a shortcoming that did not go unnoticed by Subcommittee Chairman Kathleen Rice.
So my point is that I think for us to have a real conversation about this, we have to get real numbers. And I think Democrats and Republicans, especially on this committee, we should be able to agree with an accurate number.
The sides agreed on one thing. They plan to have more hearings on the issue. In Washington, Hannah Ehrlich, Cronkite News.
Critics at the hearing also said the policy has forced faith-based organizations to take up the role of protecting and caring for migrants turned back to Mexico, while supporters claim it's already helping with the backlog of 1 million cases in immigration courts.
Since 2012, mining has been prohibited on just over 1 million acres of federal land around the Grand Canyon, a moratorium that's set to expire in 2032. But now some in Congress are working to make that ban permanent, as Hannah Ehrlich reports from our Washington bureau.
It's called the Grand Canyon Centennial Protection Act because it was introduced on the park's 100th anniversary. And the bill's supporters say their aim is to protect the canyon for many centuries to come.
We need to make sure that those seeps and springs and waters, the life-giving waters of the Grand Canyon, are protected into perpetuity for the communities that live there, for native tribes that live there, and for wildlife.
Arizona Democratic Representative Raul Grijalva is the lead sponsor of the bill, which would make permanent the ban on uranium and other mining on more than 1,006,000 acres of land surrounding the canyon. Backers say the risk from mining is too great near a national treasure like the canyon.
These parks are in potential jeopardy if we don't stay on the ball and pay attention to them and what goes on next to them.
But critics like Arizona Republican Congressman Paul Gosar say the land affected is not even near the canyon. He accused Grijalva of fear-mongering, saying in a statement that environmental impact statements have shown that mining in the Arizona Strip poses no risk to water sources, recreation, or the Grand Canyon. Gosar and fellow Arizona Republican Representative Debbie Lesko will try to amend the bill tonight to delay its implementation or call for a study of its impact. But Rook of Public Employees for Environmental Responsibility said the time for study is past, and he fears what the Trump administration might allow without the law.
There were good reasons for the moratorium, there's good reasons for the legislation, and it's unclear what the Trump administration will do with it should it reach the president's desk.
All 5 Arizona Democrats are co-sponsors on the bill, which is expected to be voted on by the full House this week. In Washington, Hannah Ehrlich, Cronkite News.
The House committee is meeting right now to consider the amendments proposed by Gosar, Lesko, and other Republicans. But with Democrats holding 9 of the 13 seats on the Rules Committee, the amendments are unlikely to be added to the bill before it moves to the full House.
Everybody in the West talks about the scarcity of water, but what are they doing about it?
That's what the question is today at the Senate hearing that looked at innovative water conserving technologies, as Heather Cumberledge reports from our Washington bureau.
Water is life. That was said repeatedly by witnesses and lawmakers at today's hearing. But they also noted that water is the life of economic development.
We're attracting so many businesses and families coming to Arizona, and we just want to make sure that we can sustain that growth and provide opportunities for people for jobs, and we're being smart water users to secure our water future.
That was the focus of today's hearing by a Senate Energy and Natural Resources Subcommittee. The importance of water security and its impact on economic development in the West and how technology can help. One witness, ASU senior sustainability scientist John Savo, told the senators that manufacturing in the U.S., especially in the Sun Belt, is dependent on water.
Water is life, and water is also business growth in Arizona, so securing it really will make a difference in terms of how our economy grows and how we sustain Phoenix and the rest of Arizona.
But Sabo, the director of Future H2O at ASU, said the infrastructure needs to be upgraded to be more resilient in order to withstand extreme events like droughts and floods. Sabo gives U.S. water infrastructure a grade of D-. While it won't go from a D to an A overnight, he said, it could be boosted to a C through policy reform, rapid upgrades to distribution systems, and taking advantage of new technology. McSally echoes Sabo's call for new technology.
Embracing outside-of-the-box solutions has always been an important factor for Arizona's water supply.
McSally and Nevada Senator Catherine Cortez Masto said they have introduced new legislation to increase funding for water conservation research, which is so vital to their states.
Water's not going to hold us back. Arizona can continue to grow and provide more opportunities for people without having that be a limitation. And I really think the discussion here today helped see this as an opportunity, not as a challenge.
In Washington, Heather Cumberledge, Cronkite News.
Arizona has long been at the forefront of efforts to use public money to fund charter schools and school voucher programs. But does it need more? State Treasurer Kimberly Yee thinks so. Yee was at a forum in Washington today on the so-called Education Freedom Scholarships, and Cronkite News reporter Hannah Ehrlich was there to bring us the story.
Yee joined Trump administration officials to talk up the Education Freedom Scholarship Plan, a school funding program that was unveiled by the administration in February, but has stalled in Congress since then. The plan would offer up to $5 billion a year in tax credits to people who donate to state-recognized scholarship funds for K-12 students. Yee said it's all about choice for parents and for states.
It provides a tax credit for individuals to provide options for families to choose the schools of their choice.
But the money has to come from somewhere, and opponents say it's going to come out of public schools that need the money most. The National Education Association said in a statement that the administration plan would end up, quote, starving resources from public schools that 90% of America's students attend. It went on to call this another failed voucher scheme. But the plan had some powerful backers today, including White House advisor Kellyanne Conway and U.S. Education Secretary Betsy DeVos. While boosting the federal plan for K-12 students, DeVos had praise for the flexibility of Arizona's empowerment scholarship accounts.
Arizona, for example, has an ESA that if you still have a balance at the conclusion of your K-12 years, you can use it for higher education. States that participate in this may look at doing something similar.
Yee said Arizona is already ahead of most states when it comes to school choice options, but that every state should offer such options.
Beyond that, I love that the states will have the ability to design this initiative as it works for its individual state.
The National Mall in Washington is sometimes called the nation's front lawn. From concerts to festivals to inaugurations, it's a place to gather and celebrate. A place where Latinos say they should be celebrated too, as Cronkite News reporter Brian Peach tells us from our Washington bureau.
Along the National Mall in Washington, D.C., the federal government has already created a National Museum of the American Indian, a National Museum of African American History, and, if advocates have their way, the building behind me could soon become the first site of the National Museum of the American Latino.
And it is time, my friends, to move forward with an American Latino Museum on the National Mall as part of the Smithsonian Institution.
The National Museum of the American Latino Act would direct the Smithsonian Institution to create the museum highlighting Latino contributions to the United States. It would be the first museum to honor Latinos on a national scale.
And it's important for us to understand that without a Latino museum, that memory, that history, that reality, that truth will not be realized in the hearts and minds of the Latino community, of the American community, and the people of the world.
The bill, which had its first House committee hearing yesterday, calls for a site on or near the National Mall, joining museums such as the Museum of African American History and the Museum of the American Indian. Labor leader and civil rights activist Dolores Huerta said it's important to honor the Latino community's long history of contributions to the United States.
And they don't realize that we have been here since before the United States was actually a country, a government, you know, that we were here before that time.
There's still a long road before the museum can hold its first exhibit. If the bill passes, there will still be years of designing, building, and fundraising for the project. The African American History Museum and the American Indian Museum both took over a decade from fundraising to opening.
President Donald Trump is fond of talking about the swamp creatures he says inhabit Washington. Well, while they weren't from the swamp, there were some actual creatures last night at a Capitol Hill event, and they were there for a cause, as Cronkite News reporter Heather Cumberledge reports from D.C.
Lobbyists on Capitol Hill come in a lot of different shapes and sizes, but not many come with feathers, scales, and covered in fur. Then again, these are not your typical lobbyists.
We're here today to keep saving our animals and realizing they are a very valuable part of our creation.
The blessing was hosted by the National Religious Partnership for the Environment and the House Natural Resources Committee. And the animals were in a Capitol office building to bring attention to endangered species. Through the blessings, the endangered animals were named ambassadors for their species. A bearded dragon, a ball python, a tortoise, a terrapin wood turtle, a macaw, and an African gray parrot were all brought out to highlight the importance of protecting species. It wasn't just staff participating in the event. Furry friends of Capitol Hill workers and lawmakers were invited to come participate and receive a blessing as well.
At this time, we invite those of you who have other pets and animals to come, and we will offer a blessing to them.
May you enjoy life together. And
it's often said we should be the person our pet thinks we are, and we'd be better humans for that.
In Washington, Heather Cumberledge, Cronkite News.
The blessing of the animals comes as Congress is considering plans to revamp the Endangered Species Act. But with Democrats and Republicans in the House each pushing vastly different approaches to the law, it could turn into a dogfight on Capitol Hill. Sometimes it's a jungle in Washington.
There are a lot of words associated with life in Washington. Thanks is usually not one of them.
But everybody finds something to be thankful for this time of year. And members of Arizona's congressional delegation are no different, as Heather Cumberledge reports from our Washington bureau.
With all the chaos going on in Washington, it can be hard to be grateful. That's why these Arizona lawmakers are looking close to home.
I am grateful for so many things this year. I'm grateful for the opportunity to represent the best district in the United States of America, CD9. I'm grateful for my family and my children. And I'm grateful that the Phoenix Suns look like they're going to be pretty good this year. It's been a long time. I'm excited about that.
I'm so thankful for my family. I have 3 grandsons under the age of 4. I have a 2-year-old, a 3-year-old, a 4-year-old, and they're just the joy of my life. My husband and I enjoy them so much. In fact, my husband said, "Oh, I know now why we had children, so we could have grandchildren."
I am blessed. I have the world's most perfect little girl. She just turned 4 years old. And it's hard to describe how joyful that is. My wife and I waited a long time, and I never thought I could have that much fun.
I'm thankful for my family. My dad, who is so hardworking and passed away when I was 12, and just the opportunities that I've had in life because of him and my mom and their hard work. I'm thankful for the freedoms that we have in America, and I'm thankful for our men and women in uniform who serve us every day to protect those freedoms.
Be inclusionary of other people versus exclusionary. I think those are the big message I would leave with people. It's a time of giving, a time of celebrating all the great things that we have, and including people into our families, bringing those out from the cold, those that are homeless, showing them that there's want and that there's need to be around community. I think that's great things about Thanksgiving, and I would implore everybody to join in.
Well, we all get together for Thanksgiving. I'm happy for the health of my family, trying to make sure that our country does better. I'm thankful very much for the fact that I was born in America.
They all shared one message.
Have a joyous Thanksgiving. We are incredibly blessed to live in Arizona, and just have a great time with it.
In Washington, Heather Cumberledge, Cronkite News.
There's higher education, and then there's really higher education, as outer space.
A satellite made by ASU students got a lift to the International Space Station this weekend, and Cronkite News reporter Brian Peach was on hand for the launch.
That was the sound of success for Sarah Rogers, one of the Arizona State University students who built a microsatellite launched here Saturday at NASA's Wallops Island Flight Facility on Virginia's eastern shore.
It means so much, and it's just beyond words how incredibly awesome that is to see everyone's hard work finally pay off.
The satellite, which took around 3 years to design and build, is about the size of a loaf of bread. It shared space on NASA's Cygnus rocket with 14 other CubeSats, along with supplies, a space oven, and live mice. The ASU CubeSat, named Phoenix, will orbit the Earth to measure temperatures in large cities to determine how building materials and urban design cause temperatures to rise.
The urban heat island effect leads to a rise in the surface temperature of the area, which leads to higher energy bills, heat exhaustion, things like that. And it also leads to climate change as well.
The satellite will gather data from several cities around the U.S., from Phoenix to Minneapolis.
So we want to take that data and give it back to urban planners so that way they can do something beneficial with it. We can make our cities more sustainable for future generations.
The rocket docked today with the International Space Station. Astronauts will launch the Phoenix CubeSat into orbit in January, where it will remain for about 2 years before falling back to Earth. At the NASA Flight Facility on Wallops Island, Virginia, Brian Peach, Cronkite News.
That's it for this special edition of Cronkite News. Thanks for joining us. For top Arizona stories anytime, go to cronkitenews.azpbs.org.